the Cincinnati Reds are probably going to be last when we sum up the wins this year. I think that let's start with a timeline. We had a timeline for the Pirates, and we thought it might be in the next year or two. What do you think is the timeline here, Britt, for the Reds? How long till the Reds are more relevant?
I think they're like maybe a year behind the Pirates. I think you look at some of that young pitching, Hunter Green, Ashcroft, is it Graham, right? Graham Ashcroft, and then Nick Lodolo. Yeah. And I think that's going to be, you made the joke before, and then I said that's not right. But these three guys are going to be the centerpiece of Cincinnati's starting pitching, right? If these guys can develop into what they think, the Reds are going to be good, maybe as soon as 2025. I think when you're banking on a young starting pitching rotation, there's so many question marks. I mean, last spring, I went and saw the Tigers, and they were banking on young, unproven starting pitching for the most part. And obviously, it was a catastrophe.
And you fell for it a little bit.
I totally did. I wrote this great story. I think everyone else should know that I'm wrong a lot. So maybe the Cubs will win the World Series.
That's baseball. That's baseball. Anybody who claims they're not wrong a lot in baseball,
yeah. But I did. I totally fell for it. I mean, I think Hinch is a great manager, and I thought, you looked at how the Tigers had turned it around in the second half of the previous season. They had all the makings, a couple veterans. They had all the makings of this turnaround team, right? But the problem is, and I saw this in Baltimore too. They tried to kind of hitch their cart to young starting pitching, and they all failed. They had this group of Jake Arrieta and Brad Bergeson and Brian Mattis and Zach Britton, and none of these guys. Chris Tillman had a couple good years. Zach Britton, they moved to the bullpen, and he obviously became a terrific reliever. Jake Arrieta had to go to Chicago to have really maximize his talent to win the Cy Young and all of that. But there is an inherent danger in having your rebuild live and die off the young starting pitching, and it makes it a little bit more difficult, I think, to kind of say this team is going to be good then. I think they're going to take their lumps. There's going to be times when you're really like, is this headed in the right direction? But for the Reds, it has to be, because there was nowhere else to go. I mean, they bottomed out. They cleared payroll. They got rid of basically everyone not named Joey Votto, and who, by the way, thinks that aliens are going to help the Reds win the World Series. Did you guys see that? So what do we know? We should just
that was a bold prediction. That made me... Yeah, his bold prediction was that somehow aliens made it. Oh, aliens were friendly, and we had to interact with them, but there was no baseball in between. And the Reds won like a 6-week season and steamrolled through the playoffs.
Yeah, and won the World Series.
Joey Votto knows how much needs to go wrong in the world for the Reds to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
No, that's actually more likely than making the playoffs,
right? Yeah. They're just far behind. I mean, what were they last year? What did they start off? 0 and what? Or 1 and what? That first month of the season.
They won 3 games in April.
Yeah.
It was bad enough where I actually got pulled off a trip to Cincinnati because I was told we need to save our money for later in the season. And I was there. I was like, all right, we're already mailing it in on a couple teams right now. It's April. All right.
Amazing.
Sometimes in April. I
sometimes
think
in March.
Yeah, I think Jonathan India will bounce back. I think Will Myers was a decent acquisition, but I also think that if those two things happen, they might just be as likely to be traded as to stay in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I think if Joey Votto shows something coming back from labrum surgery at 39, which is tough, he's in a walk year. I don't know. I wonder, do you think that Joey Votto would accept a trade to a contender at this point of his career, as having always been a Cincinnati Red?
Well, when was the last time that he really was in contention? Was it 2012? That was over a decade ago.
2 years ago, they almost made the playoffs, and it feels like a lifetime ago.
Oh, you're right.
It was only 2 years ago. It feels like 10.
That's crazy.
I know.
That's when they spent a little bit really quickly. They got Mike Moustakas.
That was the COVID year.
Are you talking about the COVID year?
I think so, yeah. Was it a 2020? Yeah. think that was the year when they almost made the playoffs, or was it 19?
In 2020, they were third and lost, and they made the playoffs. They lost
So
that
they
because
had
remember
they had a big expanded playoffs, right?
yeah, they had the big expanded
Yeah.
playoffs, and they made it. And they had Trevor Bauer won the Cy Young, and they lost to the
Yeah.
Braves 2-0 in the NL wild card.
Because
Were the
it
Reds
was
the team that never
very.
scored a run?
Oh,
Yeah, I
I
think
think they were the
Katie's
team that
right.
didn't score a run in the postseason.
I think she's right. They got steamrolled.
that's not great. They also made the postseason by going 31-29, which is I think why Joey Votto said if we have a 6-week season, we have a chance.
Mm.
But that was interesting because I think when you look at, I think that's when we were talking about the Pirates and how we add, you guys were pointing this up, like how do they add to it? It's super important because the Reds did have some pieces and they had some pieces and then they added to it and they just added the wrong pieces. It seems,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
know. Maybe there's a lesson there for him. I kind of think that Joey Votto might do it. He's kind of a YOLO guy. That's what the impression I get from
Joey
him.
Votto, yeah, that's a good description. Big YOLO guy for Joey Votto.
Yeah. So
yeah.
if he's like this will be fun and crazy, and the Reds are like we'll save $1 million, then I think it happens. But he has to show something first because there's not a lot of demand for first base DH types at 39. So he has to come back off of a pretty tough injury to the shoulder and show something. But and India could show something and get traded. Myers could show something. I really like Ellie De La Cruz. I don't know how much you guys know about Ellie De La Cruz, Noelvi Marte, and some of their guys that are coming up. But is there a position player? What do you generally think of? Prospects like Ellie De La Cruz that are like huge power, but lots of strikeouts and lots of walks. I don't know if Nolan Gorman is a little bit along those lines where it's like, this could go either way. Maybe even O'Neal Cruz is a little bit like that, where it's like this huge upside, but it may not happen. What does that make you think of when you look at Ellie De La Cruz and the Reds?
I mean, I think that's kind of just the trend in baseball development, especially for power, right? We see that a lot. Oh, this guy can mash the ball. He's going to give us 30 home runs. He's also going to strike out a third of the time. We're going to take it. I know that baseball is somewhat, depending on the organization, shifting away from the two true outcome approach, but a lot of organizations are not. And you're going to see a lot of value, especially with that young, promising power. That's just too alluring and too exciting for a lot of farm systems to be like, nope, we're going to go back to contact rates. We're going to go back to hitting for average. You don't see that a lot. So it's less of a red flag for me now. I think power plays a significant amount in baseball. I mean, with Gorman himself, that's a guy who could probably hit about 25 to 30 home runs from the left side, and he's going to strike out a lot. But it got to a point where this is the biggest danger with power prospects. That power has to come. You can't it sounds obvious, but you can't just have that high strikeout rate and eventually attribute it to, he's going to figure himself out. The thing with guys with promised power and high strikeout rates is if you don't deliver on that promised power, your strikeout rate is going to be borderline useless to have you in the lineup. So that's my only concern when I see power prospects. We've seen a ton pan out, and also as hitters mature, they become a little bit more well-rounded. But for these young guys, it's a little risky for me to focus just on power because the strikeout rate as they adapt to the big league level is almost certainly going to go higher.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, keep in mind, we've also seen busts because there's no bigger jump in sports than AAA to the big leagues, right? So I think it comes down to a couple things. The guy has to be willing to adjust. Now look at Aaron Judge's swing like 5 years ago, right? Like Aaron Judge has become like this perfect hitter because he's not just a power hitter. He's also a guy that hits for average. He's also a guy that gets on base. Does that become something that guys emulate? Does the game start to shift where we're seeing guys, who have that power, but have a little bit of the ability to do other things, especially now that they're getting rid of the shift? I think that's something to keep in mind. But when you talk to like talent evaluators and things like that, Katie's right. I mean, it comes down to, is that swing going to be able to translate to the high velocity at the big leagues where everyone coming out of that bullpen is throwing upper 90s now, right? Like I can't tell you how many guys come up from AAA and they're like, that is a foul tip in the minor leagues. It's strike 3 up here. I mean, the jump is huge, and it's such a tiny little margin for error once they're in the big leagues. They are facing such better pitching every single day than they are at the AAA level. So it really comes down to being able to make those adjustments, because very quickly any hole, any flaw gets exposed.
Yeah, that's true. All right, one last question for y'all. This is a thought exercise. They have a player, Christian Encarnacion Strand, right now. Pretty good prospect that they got from the Twins in the Tyler Malley trade, I believe. Christian Encarnacion Strand does make good contact, or at least he is this spring. And I think he leads the Cactus, or not the Cactus. Yes, the Cactus. Yes,
Yes,
Cactus.
the Cactus.
He leads the Cactus League in hits. He is hitting the ball. He's hitting the ball for power. He's making contact. He looks like the future. He's played 208 plate appearances at AA last year, but he's 23 and by all rights looks like he is ready to play in the big leagues. You've got some other pieces, Spencer Steer, Kyle, Newman, Jonathan India. Maybe you're telling the story to ownership that Lodolo, Green, and Ashcraft are going to take that step forward. You put Luke Weaver and Luis Sessa behind them, so you have credible veterans there. The bullpen's coming together. This could be the year. Do you go break camp with Christian Encarnacion Strand as your everyday third baseman or first baseman? And start the clock on somebody like that? Or do you sort of keep your cards in your pocket for a little while longer if you're the Reds? Let's start with you, Katie.
I'm no fan of service time manipulation by any means, but if you're going to start the clock on a prospect, to me, it should come when your team is in contention. And I just call me crazy. I don't see that for the Reds. Right. Right. No, subtle hint. But call me crazy, you guys. I just don't see that. I don't see the Reds in contention this year.
Is there an argument to be made, Britt, that you just have to start winning sometime? You just have to start trying sometime, and you don't know when that time's going to be? I don't know.
Sure. I mean, that's a great argument for us to have. But I think if you're in the front office and you have to defend your decisions, and you're also planning on being part of the Reds front office besides this year, right? Then no, you can't. I agree with Katie. You have to say, all right, we've rebuild. We're looking at this in that's the thing. Front offices look at these in 3 to 5 year increments. So there's really no way to defend being yeah, let's start that clock now, so that in 3 years we really are going to have to do, you know what I mean? It has the ripple effect on the whole plan that the front office has laid out. So I don't see that happening at all. Because like Katie said, they're not a fringy, if they were like the Cubs and you're like, well, it could help them get over the top. Maybe, but they're just not in that position at all. So I don't see them, even though they've kind of changed with the new CBA, the way we look at service time manipulation. I don't see the upside here for Cincinnati at all.
Okay, well, how about this? There is a draft pick associated with a player that receives sufficient awards consideration. They could get a draft pick if he's
but you're banking on a lot of things to go right.
Yeah, that's so subjective. You're banking on baseball writers to vote for your guy to have that kind of a year.
Don't trust baseball writers. What do we
Don't trust baseball writers.
Yeah.